PlayStation 1 is the system that started it all for Sony's massively successful gaming venture. But on this channel, we don't really give it enough love, and that's purely on me. Because honestly, I just haven't got that much experience with the system. Now, more recently, I have been trying to put in a little bit of time with the hardware and the software of this amazing console. Now, what this video is then, in essence, is more of a hardware perspective. So we're looking at if the PlayStation 1 hardware itself is still worth it in 2025. The software, so the games, is always going to be worth it in my opinion. So there are so many fantastic titles. Gran Turismo, for example, this is where it all started, and you might be thinking, well, why do I want to play the oldest Gran Turismo? But after hopping into it for quite a while over the last week or so, I really enjoy this. I've redone my License B or my International B license, whatever it's called, again for like the fifth time on this game, and it's still fun. I still really enjoy it. So for me, the software is less of a question of whether or not it is worth it or not. If that is your question and if that's what you want an answer for, yes, the software is always worth it. But the question really becomes how to play this software. Now, there is so many different ways to play PS1 software, and I'm not talking about even just emulation and stuff like that. I'm talking about official ways to play PlayStation 1 software. So this is more of a hardware deep dive in all the various ways you can play PS1 software. So first of all, there's two fundamentals when we look at how to play PS1 software. There is the physical way and the digital way. Now, the physical way is you can play PS1 software on PS1 consoles, PS2 consoles, and PS3 consoles, all directly off the disc. Now, there are some various nuances in this regard. So, for example, there are some games that, while it is a PS1 game, it might not run on PlayStation 3. Good example, the platinum version of Final Fantasy VIII. Now, I was really excited to hop into this, but I wanted to play it on my PS3 when I originally got it, because for some weird reason I wanted to take this and remote play it to my PS Vita and play my PS1 game on my PS3 through my PS Vita. Now, if you followed that track, the unfortunate thing that happened here is this specific version of Final Fantasy VIII does not work on PS3. So that then begs the question, is PS3 the best way to play these games? And the answer is yes and no. Obviously no, when you can't play the games in their entirety. However, when I was playing Gran Turismo on my PS3, it was a far greater experience than when I was playing it on PS1. The reason for that is the controller. The controller for the PS3 is something I have a lot of mixed opinions about, but one thing it does do great is racing games, and playing Gran Turismo 1 on PS3 was definitely my favorite way of playing the game. So there is definitely some merit to playing some of your older games on PS3. Another very big credit in the basket of the PS3 is the fact that the PS3 emulates these games in a way. So I have my PS1 disc of Gran Turismo is quite scratched and it's quite difficult to play through fully, and sometimes the loading doesn't always go right through. But because it's emulating on the PS3, and I think this is the reason why, but it just kicks into the game and it works flawlessly without any hiccups and any major loading screens. So that has been a fantastic way of getting into games that might not always work 100%. But then again, Final Fantasy VIII on the Platinum version just doesn't work. So that's the PS1 and PS3 spoken of. Now, obviously more specifically the PS3 has some positives and negatives, but the PS1, obviously, it's always going to work. It's a PS1. It has the capabilities of playing their games. Unless the game itself is damaged, the PS1 is going to be able to play its entire library. That is just the easiest way to put it. If you want reliability in terms of I want to be able to play every game, get a PS1 system. However, if you are willing to figure out the nuances and want to probably play the game in the best possible way, the PS3 might be an ideal standpoint. But what about the PS2? All PS2s are backwards compatible with PS1 games. And this isn't a software emulation or anything like that. It has PS1 hardware in the system. So then, is the PS2 not a better way of playing PS1 games? And the answer is the same as the PS1. If the PS2 is your best way of playing PS1 games, then yes, the PS2 is probably the better way of playing it because you have the PS2. Because the PS2 is more readily available, especially somewhere like South Africa, where we don't have PS1s all over the show. Although I will admit to the fact that I think we have more PS1 systems than actual PS1 games in South Africa. I know that sounds weird, but whenever I type in or look for PS1 games on secondhand markets, I always find the systems, and while there's not that many of them, it always seems like there's more systems than there is software, which is just a quirk of South Africa. But if you have a PS2 already, the best way to play your PS1 games is on PS2. Just be aware, you do need a PS1 memory card. You cannot save PS1 files to a PS2 memory card. You can use the PS2 controller, you can use a PS1 controller even on a PS2, but you have to have a PS1 memory card for your PS2 if you want to save your progress. But now, this isn't the only way you can play PS1 games. You can play PS1 games through various digital fronts. Now on PS Vita, PSP and PS3, you can buy PS1 software on the PlayStation 3 store. Yes, at the moment we're having a little bit of a scare with the PS3 store, and I don't know what's going on there. I'm hoping that it sorts itself out relatively soon, because I think it's time that I invest some money on those digital softwares that I've been putting off buying, because as a physical collector it does hurt to buy these digital games. However, there is some massive advantages to buying these specific digital games. First of all, price and availability. If you search for a PAL version and even an NTSC version of Castlevania Symphony of the Night, you are going to be paying a massive premium on this game if you want it physically. However, it is available for quite affordable on the PlayStation 3 storefront. So on PS3 you can go find it, I think it's like 170 or 190 Rand, which is about say $10 give or take, which means not only are you going to be able to play that game on your PS3, you can also then transfer it to your PSP and PS Vita. And if Sony ever decides to bring this game to the PlayStation Plus service, there is a good likelihood that it will be grandfathered in and you will have that copy of the game on your PS4 and PS5. Now, speaking of PS4 and PS5, we obviously also have PlayStation Plus Premium subscription, which gives you access to the PlayStation Classics. This is a fantastic way of playing PlayStation 1 software, don't get me wrong. I love this for the fact that I can rewind, and a lot of these games are made a little bit more accessible with all the different features you have built into the hardware side and the software reprogramming of buttons, making games a lot easier to play in a more modern time. However, we cannot ignore the fact that out of the 4,000 games that were released on PlayStation 1, we have a very small selection of PS1 games available on the subscription. Now, it's nowhere near as bad as the PS2 selection, but it is still not enough to cover everything. So if I look at my physical collection of PlayStation 1 games, besides Final Fantasy VIII, which has remakes and stuff, and I don't think it's available on PlayStation Plus, I might be wrong, my other 5 physical games are nowhere on PlayStation Plus. And we're talking not only third-party classics like Rayman 2, we're talking about first-party titles like Gran Turismo and Gran Turismo 2. Now, yes, I understand that maybe these aren't the most ideal games to have on the PlayStation Plus subscription, but I would still love to see them there. They are fundamental building blocks of what the PlayStation system became. So not having these 2 games on the PlayStation Plus system already is quite a red flag in terms of that. And you're missing out on so many fantastic titles. So while the digital way does exist, it is very limited. Even when you're talking about purchasing on the PlayStation 3 storefront or the Vita storefront, to try to find some of the games that you want, and I promise you 90% of them aren't there anymore, but even to try to find some of them, you can't just type in PS1 because that search prompt doesn't always work. You literally have to search them by game basis. The way I found Castlevania Symphony of the Night is I literally had to type out Castlevania on that storefront to find it, which was a whole different tedious task. However, it is a way of purchasing those games more affordably. But I digress. I am really digressing. what is my outtake? What is my take? What system do I recommend for playing PlayStation 1 games? My initial response would be, if you have a PS2, there is your answer. That is your answer. Go use your PS2. If you are looking to either purchase a PS1, a PS2, or a PS3, I think the best way to do it is probably purchasing a PS2 and a PS3. For the PS3, if you have software that does work on it, you will always probably find that more enjoyable. Plus the fact that it has an HDMI connection, making it much easier to play on modern TVs, is the best quality of life feature in terms of how to play more aged games on modern hardware. But if a game, for example, like Final Fantasy 8 doesn't work, a PS2 is an incredibly cheap way of getting reassurance that these softwares are going to work on whatever system you have. If you like the look of a PS1 or a PS1 Slim, by all means go get one. But I just feel for a price to performance ratio, the PS2 is probably the best way to play PS1 games if you do not have, if the games you want to play are not supported on PS3. PS3 is still relatively, I'm not going to say expensive, but it is definitely more expensive than PS2. PS2 is the cheapest way to get into PS1 software, and I think it's still a fantastic system overall. So that is my take on, is the PS1 worth it in 2025? Yes, the PS1 software is worth it in 2025. That's never going to be up for debate. Yes, it may be more challenging to play because these are older titles, but from a hardware standpoint, I think that the PS1 is a great looking system that is great for display, the PS1 Slim or the PS1 original. But if you want to play your software, your titles, then I recommend probably a PlayStation 2 because it is probably the most affordable way to get into this game. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and let me know your comment in the comments below what your favorite PS1 games of all time are, because I am definitely going to start putting a little bit of a dent into this software as soon as I can. I have only 6 titles, but I know that there's a lot more that I want to be putting into the collection with the Astrobot collection, which I am hoping we have a massive update relatively soon for you guys. Also, guys, channel memberships are live. If you want to support the channel in a more direct way, please make sure you join channel memberships. There is already one video up there, and I am planning on doing a lot more over the coming weeks. A lot of the services aren't live, so if you do want to postpone your membership, don't worry, I understand. But if you do want to start supporting from the very get-go, we are going to have channel memberships, and there are some channel videos up there already for you guys. So guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy your weekend, and I will check you soon. Cheers.